Hey everyone, welcome to Legendmakers. Today is a special episode recorded specifically for Legendhaven, our first ever convention. Today we're joined by Joe Campbell. Welcome, Joe. How are you?
I'm doing well, Dominic. Thanks for having me here. Excited.
Very cool. Today's Joe's talking about, his title is Light 'em Up, Rain of Fire, and Cool Storytelling. So Joe is an author and he's also a mentor with LegendFiction. Joe, let's start with this idea. Why did you call it Light 'em Up? What's your big idea here?
So when I think of Christian storytellers and just tackling a story to begin with, I always like to start with the concept. And I think that a lot of Christian storytellers today, and especially when I was growing up, tended to come at stories from the point of view of what do we want to say? What's important? What kind of morals do we want to get across? Which can often lead to really kind of clunky storytelling and stuff that doesn't really grab my attention. And so I really want to stress the importance of you got to have a strong concept. You got to have a story that will grab people's attentions. And so many storytellers today, especially Christian storytellers, tend to look at stories from like, hey, I want to go out and spread the word and tell people all about Jesus and everything. I'm like, yeah, that's nice, but what kind of stories are you telling? And will anybody actually want to listen to those? So I want to, hook people's attention. And part of that is tackling from the 2002 movie, Rain of Fire, which I think has some wonderful imagery, wonderful concepts. And it's like, even if you come away not remembering very much about the movie, there are certain key elements that stick in your brain. I think that's one thing that you have to have important to any story is you have to have that moment that people can cling on to and say, oh, that's the story. That's what sticks in my head.
So I want to unpack that and dig into that a little bit more. And let's talk dragons, because that's what our con theme this year is. So first, Joe, let's talk a little bit about your background. What's your origin story? Who are you? In, let's say, about a minute, 2 minutes.
All righty. So I am a writer. I am a mentor here at LegendFiction. My dad was a newspaper editor, and so he used to write editorial stories about our family every week, and that kind of sparked my interest in telling stories, especially seeing my dad be the one being kind of like, hey, you can take these moments from our family life and turn them into really interesting, compelling stories. And so I started pretty young. As a kid, I would write books about. I was into Redwall at the time. I wrote my own kind of Redwall ripoff of animals in this kingdom and all their things. Then the Lord of the Rings, Peter Jackson's movies came out. I got that also at the same time that DVDs became big. I got into watching behind the scenes bonus making of features and how to really tell a story and adapt and how they tackled those stories and just kind of the meat of filmmaking. So I got into filmmaking, went to school for becoming a film director, made some short films, wrote some more short stories, and now here I am just writing more stories. I'm working on a couple of books right now. And yeah, it's been interesting coming from a Catholic storytelling point. Just really having a love for, I love Edgar Rice Burroughs, Michael Crichton, some of these classic science fiction fantasy authors have always sparked my interest. And that's the kind of stuff I want to put out into the world.
Nice. Okay, so you picked Rain of Fire as something that's fun enough and it's got a bold and dramatic and maybe silly enough concept to just plunk you down for like an hour and a half and just watch dragons rip up the world and then humans sort of deal with that. This is kind of your thing for your talk here, is starting with the concept, not with the message. Can you, let's unpack Rain of Fire a little bit and why you picked that for us to talk about.
Yeah, so Rain of Fire, it's, for anybody who's familiar with the movie, the one thing that comes across and that will stick in your head, even if it's been years since you've seen the movie, is, oh, that movie has tanks and it's got dragons. There you are. I mean, yeah. I can't think of any other post-apocalyptic movie that has dragons in it. Just, it's people living in almost castle-like ruins in this future, this ruined future. And they just got to fight dragons. You remember Matthew McConaughey jumping off the top of a building, attacking a dragon with an axe. These are the things that people remember about the movie. And I think that's really important to have an element like that in any story. And that movie comes at this concept not in a kind of winking, joking way. It's very
Mhm.
sincere in the way that
Stick the
it tackles
landing,
this.
like, yeah, take it seriously.
Yeah, yeah. I was watching an interview with the director, and he was saying that it would be easy to take this concept of, oh, it's dragons in the future, and make
Mhm,
it silly and make it a joke, but you buy into it because the characters buy into it, and to
mhm,
him, the characters are in this ludicrous situation, but the characters believe it, and if the characters
mhm.
believe it, then the audience believes it,
Right.
and that's what makes the story work. Now, I mean, thinking back on it, a lot of people may whether you think Reign of Fire works as a whole as a movie is one thing, but the concept, I think, is what
Mhm,
sticks in your head.
mhm.
And again, so many Christian storytellers today, I think, come at stories from the point of view of, hey, we need to say something important. And if you come at it from the point of view of message first,
Mhm.
you don't have a story. You have a sermon, is what you have.
Right, right. And I
And
mean, going with that, just sort of digging into that. I mean, you can be humorous. It doesn't. We're
yeah,
talking about serious, not as in like gritty, like Rain of Fire. Like if you dial it 2 degrees to the right, you get something like Dragonheart. 2 degrees over more, you get How to Train Your Own Dragon. So you can have levity and humor and stuff, but it's about how committed are you to the characters believing that this thing is actually real, and then orienting their lives and taking the call to adventure to deal with that, and then how that changes them. So we're like, what's it called? Suspending the disbelief. Darn, I've forgotten the rule or the phrase there, but for a moment, we're going to believe that this is actually serious. So then once you get under that, like Rain of Fire has its own message, but in a way, it's like you don't want that to be obvious. You want the fun and the drama to be obvious, right?
exactly. And taking and and taking these concepts seriously can lead to them being more fun. And I mean, one of the ways I like to tackle comedy is by taking some ridiculous situations and saying, all right, how would a real person react to this thing that could never happen to anybody else? And you can get a lot of humor
Right.
out of that.
Right.
You can have more lighthearted and more comedic stuff, but even if you're doing a comedy, the characters have to believe in the world they're in. And if the
Right.
characters don't believe in the world, then the audience is going to believe in the world,
Mhm.
or the readers in
Right. Yeah.
writings cases.
I haven't read too much Stephen King, but I've watched a couple of the shows, and this is one thing that I appreciate about how he tackles stuff. Is he'll have this wacky idea or this scary idea, and then he'll dial it all the way down to the smallest, scariest possible thing to get people to sort of itch and have to start paying attention to whatever that problem is. And then he's almost brutal in his attention to every single human, like normal human response and reaction and desire to go back to what is normal, and taking that thing seriously and not. I mean, Rain of Fire just dives right into it. We're gonna have this dragon come exploding out of the London underground, and then quick mashup shots, and then all the world is now ash, and everyone's living in castles again. And but like you said, the point is they take it seriously. What was that quote again? Like from the director, you could make anything, any silly idea,
Yeah.
serious.
Well, I don't remember what the exact quote was, but the idea that he was
Paraphrasing,
getting
yeah.
across in the interview was that if you can take any crazy idea, but if you play it like you believe in it and that the characters believe in it, then the audience is going to
Mhm.
believe in it too, and they're going
Yeah.
to believe in the cause that the characters are fighting for.
Mhm. So your key point here is then the story should always come first. And
Yeah.
and can you unpack that a little bit more?
Yeah, so I kind of latched onto this idea when I was in high school, and there were a lot of these. I think it was Pureflix or some of these Christian movies coming out,
Hmm. Yep.
uh, where the idea was they would try to preach a message about, maybe quite frequently one that kept popping up was, hey, if you pray to God, even if your life is crummy, everything's gonna get better. And I mean, high school, I'm like, no, that. Not only is that not true, but this isn't engaging as a story.
Right. Right.
Like you have characters who everything's crummy or they're being persecuted all the time. Then they pray, and whoever's persecuting them gets their comeuppance, or everything gets better. I'm like, that's not only how life works. That's not how prayer works, and this doesn't make for compelling storytelling. Because what I'm
Right.
coming
Right.
away with is, remembering these frustrating messages and not remembering anything about the stories. Whereas, something like, again, Reign of Fire, I'm at least coming away with some of these wonderful, fun images in my head. And if you watch the movie again, you really dive into it, then you start getting into, well, what makes these characters work and why are these characters fighting for what they believe in? And that's how I think you need to inject message into your story. You should always tackle it from the characters and the concept. Get something that really drives your imagination and creativity and drive with that. Because if you can keep going with that and make something compelling that's compelling to you, that will translate to the readers. And if you're coming at it from just a place of real moral centeredness, real place of beauty just from your own life, that will come through in your storytelling. Right. And I think a lot of Christian writers feel like they kind of have a responsibility to say something important and to spread God's word. And just like, you're doing that through your everyday life and how you interact with people. Hopefully you aren't going around thinking that, oh, I need to be preaching at people all the time. When I was a kid, I had a couple of friends I used to hang out with. One of them was some denomination of Christianity. The other one was an atheist. When my Christian friend found out that our atheist friend was an atheist, he started following us around with a Bible, just reading Bible passages out of it. And all we wanted to do was just hang out and have fun. And we're just, and I think that kind of example of just, hey, let's go out and hang out. And if we want to talk about stuff, we will, but we're just here to have fun. I think that was a better example to our atheist friend than any just reading a Bible at him could. Yeah.
And of course, I mean, even with ourselves, like whether Christian or not, we're all, we're all on a long, what the Holy Father calls a sacred pilgrimage, and we're all in it together. And there's all something to learn from together. So just because, we've got a specific label doesn't necessarily mean that we're better off. Like I was just watching stuff on Instagram the other day, and people were talking about, do you accept, Christ into your life? Is your life different? You feel that? I told you it'd work, didn't I? And I'm like, what life are you living? What are you talking about? Like, most people feel nothing, and for everybody else, it gets worse because you're now deliberately more attentive to your life. And that means it's going to get harder because you're having to, get your ego out of a lot of places. So I think when it comes to good storytelling, you want stuff that's going to be memorable, because if your story isn't memorable, well, they're certainly not going to stick around to find out what the message is. So I think,
it's the reason story is more important than message, in my opinion, is because if you don't have a story that's going to engage people, no one's going to want to read what you have to write. They're not going to stick around, again, like you said, to listen to what you have to say. The important thing is that you hook them in. And even if you don't have necessarily something super important to say, if you're just there to tell a good story and have a good time, people will latch onto that, and then they'll want to read more. They'll want to read the next thing you're going to read. They'll want to dig into what makes that first story work by reading into it more. They'll reread it. And you're not going to get that if you come at it from message first. You got to come at it from concept and story first. Even if it's just an image in your head, oh, this is a really cool image. This is Matthew McConaughey with a battle axe jumping off a building at a dragon. All right, where can we get the story there? Why is he on top of that building? Let's work backwards. That's the stuff you need to be focused on as a writer.
Yeah. If you're trying to be message first, go ahead and blog about it, because that's not what fiction is. Fiction is about living through somebody else's shoes and their resistance and how they deal with the drama of a situation. And stories then, they come to life inside you afterwards. I can't think of any novel I've ever read where the message was overt and clear. And I thought, I'm going to change my life because of that. That's never happened to me. But there are plenty of novels I've read where it was, like you said, drama first, story first, characters, and they're working through something, and then they go on a heroic whatever, and then years later, I'm like, oh, that's what that story was walking around. That's the heart of the story. And in that sense, I do think for a good story, a message should try to be hidden. It shouldn't be overt, because as soon as something like that is overt, it's like you lose somebody. So focus on sticking the landing, have a cool idea, and see how seriously your characters can commit to it. Would that be the takeaway you'd hope people would get?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. And to be clear, if you find along the way that you're writing the story and you have a theme or some moral that you're really passionate about, that you think, hey, you know what, this idea fits into this story, run with it. I can't tell you the number of times that I've written a story, gotten writer's block and stuck and thinking, well, I'm not quite sure where to go with this. Then I think like, well, there's this real world issue that I care about a lot that kind of relates to what I'm writing here. I didn't intend that, but it fits this character in this situation. And what do I want to say about this theme? And that can help me drive, okay, well, this is where the characters should go. And maybe the character makes a decision that I don't agree with, but it fits with his journey or where they need to go. And it helps move the story forward. But you shouldn't ever come at it from the point where you're making the message drive the story. You can use it to help fill in gaps and to help move the story forward, but the story itself and the concept should always come first.
Fantastic. Thanks, Joe. Awesome to have you on here with us. For those who are catching this, Legendmakers, it's a show for our creative community, crafted for modern Catholic and Orthodox authors. Join this private community to share your works in progress, give and get feedback, and make friends. Most importantly, to keep writing. We hope you enjoy the con, and we'll see you in the community.